Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. We're here at the 13th event in our Outcomes Estimation Tools Training webinar series. Woohoo! And this time we are featuring the Carbon Management and Emissions Tool, or COMET kit. And that includes both COMET Farm and COMET-Planner, as many of you know. Thank you for being here today. I'm Michelle Perez. I'm the Water Initiative Director here at American Farmland Trust, and I'm joined by my colleague, Aisha Tapp-Ross, the Water and Soil Health Scientist. For those of you who don't know, American Farmland Trust is a national nonprofit founded in 1980, and our mission is to save the land that sustains us by protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land and supporting the next generation of farmers. So for today's webinar, like others, we'll have a few reminders, do a quick poll to see who's in the room, and then we're going to hear from Haley Giuliano, who was previously Haley Nagle and former outreach and education specialist with Colorado State University. She will first lead us in a presentation of COMET Farm, followed by a demonstration of the tool. And then after a brief Q&A, she'll present on COMET-Planner, followed by a demonstration of that tool. And finally, we'll conclude with another Q&A period. We want to thank our funders, the EPA Office of Water, the Walton Family Foundation, and the Mosaic Foundation for making today's webinar possible. Aisha.
Yes, sorry. Now for some housekeeping reminders. We are using the Zoom webinar platform for this series, so as attendees, you'll have your camera and microphones turned off throughout the event. You can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen at any time to ask questions, and the speakers will answer your questions during the Q&A periods. You can use your name or be anonymous when asking questions or making comments. We also do have the capability to unmute you, so please indicate in the question if you would like to ask it yourself. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can direct message me and I will try and assist you. Following each webinar, you will receive an email within 3 to 4 days that will provide the recording and the slides for the presentation, as well as information about the next month's speaker. And by the following Monday, we will post the recordings to the webinar registration page, which we absolutely welcome you to share with colleagues and friends that may be interested. In a moment, I will also be sharing a link to a 9-question evaluation survey, which you can choose to answer anonymously. That should take about 2 minutes to complete. The survey will pop up when you leave, but you can also click on it now so it opens in a new tab on your browser. We ask that you please complete the survey right after the event ends. Our presenters and the AFT team rely on these surveys to help inform our next month's speaker and any changes we might need to make to the webinar series. We are also offering an incentive for completing the survey. Everyone who fills out the survey today before 6 p.m. Eastern will be entered to win a $25 Visa gift card. The winner will be notified by email tomorrow, and we appreciate your participation and wish you luck in the drawing.
Thank you for posting those both in the chat. Everyone, go to the chat, click on the link for the survey, and be prepared to finish it right away. So here we go, three pools. Thank you for your participation. So the questions have not changed. Answer them quickly. We get this over with. Which one sector best reflects your occupation? Are you with a government agency at the federal, state, or local level? Are you with a non-government organization, be it a private sector organization, an environmental group, a farm trade group? Are you with an academic institution? Are you a corporation and environmental markets developer? Or would you not find yourself in any of those and choose other? Second question, if there are only 4 types of audience members, which one best describes you? Are you a developer of outcomes estimation tools, methods, or model? Are you a current user of outcomes estimation tools, methods, or models? Are you a potential that's funny. Are you a potential future user of these? Or are you a person interested in learning about outcomes estimation tools and issues more generally? Question 3, what is your experience level with COMET Farm tools? The COMET Farm, the Planner, etc. Please just choose one. You had not heard of them, you've heard of them but never used them, you've heard of it and used it, or you refer to it often. There we go. So if everyone can participate, what's our goal that we try to get to
We try to get at least to 90%. We are at 89% right now.
Oh, Pamo,
I
so
know.
cooperative. Thank you. Feels good.
Right.
Feels
I
good
will
to me.
give probably about another 10 seconds just in case anybody else wants to complete the poll.
This bodes well for a high response rate for the surveys too. Feels like our lucky day.
All right. Yeah, we're having great participation, right? So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll.
Thank you, everybody. All righty then. Majority of you are with the government agency and nearly 60%, 13% with NGOs, 15% with academic groups, 9% with corporations or an environmental markets developer, and 4% with other. Let's see. Wow, very interesting. So maybe, yeah, 32% are current users of outcomes estimation tools, methods, or models, followed by potential future, well, person interested generally, then 26% potential future user, then 12% a developer of these tools or methods. Last question, in terms of the COMET Farm suite, majority of folks had heard of it, but never used it, followed by heard of it and are using it, about a third, and had not heard of it, 1 in 5, and I refer to it often, about 6% of you, 4 folks. All right, very cool. Thank you. Well, let's see. Without further ado, then, I believe I should stop sharing my screen. Is that correct? Oh, no, I have one slide more. Forgive me. This is a screenshot of the schedule that you all probably are familiar with. That's on the registration site, and you can find links to all the webinars in the past here and know what's coming up. So the first thing is, thank you for those of you who joined the last webinar on April 3. And that was a terrific talk by 3 folks on how to identify critical source areas and target your scarce resources to those highest priority areas. Next month, on June 5th, we're going to hear from Olivia Devereaux, president of Devereaux Consulting, who's going to present on the Chesapeake Assessment Scenario Tool, or CAS tool, which is a water quality planning tool. We hope you join that event. And we're also very excited to announce an official addition to our 2024 training. On July 10, and please note that we have moved the date to the second Wednesday of July to avoid that July 4 holiday week, we'll be joined by a representative of the Agricultural Conservation Planning Framework, or ACPF, which is a free ArcGIS toolbox that facilitates targeted conservation by identifying and addressing high-risk areas within a field, a farm, or a watershed. So a great targeting tool to add to your conservation toolbox. And now we're going to turn it over to Haley. Stop sharing now. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much for that introduction. And let's see if we can go ahead and start sharing. Michelle or Aisha, could you give me a
Looks good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so let's get started. Looking at COMET Farm and COMET-Planner. There's going to be several places to stop throughout for some questions and answers, but feel free to drop those in the Q&A as well. All right, there we go. Okay, so as Michelle and Aisha mentioned, my name is Haley Giuliano, now formerly Haley Nagle. Also, I am formerly the Outreach and Education Specialist for the COMET Farm team at Colorado State University for almost 4 years. And I recently accepted another position, so I am no longer working at COMET Farm, but I am still an expert on the tool and have lots of great things to share with you guys. And I have also relinquished this role to the very capable Andy Conlon, who I'll show you on the next slide, who is, I assure you, she is prepared to answer all the questions that you guys might have after this webinar. A little background on myself is that with the COMET team, I used to, I would filter and answer all of the questions that would come through, and I'll show you exactly where you can ask those questions. I developed trainings and the help documentation that I'll show you throughout as well. I collaborated with Carbon Cycle Institute to develop a carbon farm planning curriculum, which is available for anyone as well to enroll in that. I also provided GIS support for the team. And then most recently, I led the UX redesign, which we'll be talking a bit about the upcoming new interface that you guys will see in a few months. And then outside of COMET, I really bought into the whole Colorado lifestyle with my new husband, Michael, and our 3-year-old Rhodesian Ridgeback. We spend a lot of time biking and hiking, which you can see here. I used to be a high school teacher back in Georgia for low-income areas, which led me around the world, from taking students to Germany and Switzerland on environmental trips to climbing Kilimanjaro when I did a Fulbright in Tanzania. So I've been all over the place, but for now I'm in Colorado. While I'm not on the COMET team anymore, I do still love to keep up with them. And I'm excited to see what they're doing soon. But for now, we're going over the current COMET farm, which it is the same as it was when I was still on the team a month ago. Andy Conlon, she is she was still the outreach and education specialist as well when I was there. And then she has taken over full-time doing that now. So she is more than capable to field any questions that you guys have after this webinar as well. All right, so what we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you an overview of all of the COMET tools. I know some of you might already be familiar with them, but you also are aware that they are complicated tools in terms of there's just a lot of information, and I'm here to make that a little bit easier to digest. We're going to go over just the background of those tools, as well as how they're related to project outcomes and how those could be used for different projects. We're going to talk about the underlying methods and system boundaries, as well as features and limitations of the COMET tools. Then I'm going to demo COMET Farm first. It's more complicated, and we need a solid understanding of COMET Farm before we dive into COMET Planner. And so after each of those, we'll have a little Q&A session as well. So let's look at just a background of the COMET tools. So USDA, Climate Change Office and NRCS took things beyond the 2006 IPCC methods and developed what we know as the Blue Book. This Blue Book down at the bottom looks a little different now, and we'll get there in a few slides. And this Blue Book is going to define those equations, the methods, the models that underlying all of COMET Farm to quantify and estimate those agricultural related emissions related specifically to conservation practice implementation. And so the COMET tools, first COMET Farm, later COMET Planner, were created in parallel with and as a function of the Blue Book. And so the COMET tools are really an interface for all of these methods. And so COMET Farm was originally designed as a way for farmers, ranchers, conservation planners, educators, anyone to estimate emissions related to that agricultural management. And using that to make informed decisions on the potential management changes that could impact soil carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. COMET Planner, which we'll talk about towards the end of this, was created later as a simpler tool, which you'll see the complexity of COMET Farm first. COMET Planner was created to assess the relative benefits of implementing conservation practices against a fixed baseline, but intended to do it very quickly, and we'll get to that. So let's look at, there we go. Let's look at a feature snapshot. So some key features for both COMET Farm and COMET Planner. With COMET Farm, users are able to create a project. They're able to create a lot of projects. It's basically unlimited. I've only met one person who's met that 500 project limit. And within COMET Farm, a project is defined as a collection of fields, animals, or woody systems. Today, we're looking at just fields. And users are able to run a project related to fields, up to 50 fields per project, which we're going to look at. And so outside of the tool, a user could aggregate the reported estimates for a larger scale. COMET Planner is going to be at a regional or county level. And so COMET Planner will provide those relative benefits of implementing the conservation practices at a county rectified major land resource area. But you'll just have to know your county and your state that we're looking at. In terms of outcomes, both tools are going to give you soil carbon estimates And greenhouse gas emission estimates, we're looking at carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. With methane today, the only thing we would be looking at in the field level accounting, if methane is going to be included, it would just be for a burning biomass. However, with the new update, we will be including rice methane as well. However, that is not currently in the tool. COMET-Planner still gives the soil carbon and GHG estimates. However, this is going to be relative to a fixed baseline, which we will dive into that fixed baseline later. And the report is going to look just a little bit different than COMET Farm because we're just giving the relative benefits and we're not giving the estimated emissions or estimated reductions, which we're going to look at a report for both tools as well. And so COMET-Planner can really be summed outside of the tool by the user for a larger project level, or you can just do it individually at that county level. And then conservation practices that are included in COMET Farm. We're going to look in detail at how to create those projects in COMET Farm. However, you as the user are at liberty to make specific changes that are available in COMET Farm, which we'll look at that. And these can be related to planting, harvest, tillage, other planting implements, fertilizer, manure applications, irrigation changes, liming changes, burning changes. There is some features to help quickly add actual conservation practices. So you have the ability to just quickly add a reduction in tillage or a reduction in fertilizer or adding cover crops. But your management changes that you can make in COMET Farm are very flexible. COMET-Planner, however, on the other hand, is simpler, easier to use, but it is based on 34 NRCS Conservation Practice Standards. And these standards are going to vary in availability as well as implementation based on where in the United States you are. Let's see. There we go. Up next, we've got the land use and production systems. Within COMET Farm, we talked about projects, and those projects can be related to cropland, pasture land, rangeland, orchard, vineyards, animal agriculture, which will be expanding coming soon, agroforestry systems, and forestry. A lot of those are still offered in COMET-Planner, but they look a little different in terms of classes of conservation or classes of systems. So for COMET-Planner, we're looking at croplands or grazing lands, herbaceous covers, disturbed lands, riparian areas, and agroforestry systems. Where are these tools available? So with COMET Farm, we are looking at the lower 48 United States. Currently, there is not a Hawaii, Alaska, or US territories. This would be due to a combination of either interest, funding, or the availability of soil data. However, I can say that coming soon, there are hopes to add some US territories after the new US interface for COMET Farm is released. With COMET-Planner, all of the 50 US states are available in COMET-Planner at the moment. It is very limited in Hawaii and Alaska in terms of which practices and implementations are available. However, there is relatively, I believe it was June of last year, the COMET team released COMET-Planner Global, which does allow for estimates outside of the United States for some conservation practices. And so where it's not available in COMET-Planner, you could check out the COMET-Planner Global tool to generate an estimate for some practices. Now let's talk about how much time it takes. So COMET Farm is going to take quite a bit more time than COMET-Planner. This is also going to depend on the size of your project, how many fields, what type of management, how much you know about the history of that land. It also is going to take it's going to take you a lot of time to enter all of the management that is required in order to generate a report. However, with the new interface that's coming soon, that is going to drop from a 23-year required baseline to a minimum of 5 years. which if you're familiar with COMET Farm, people have been asking for this since before I was on the team. And you will just need to know, actually, I think this might be skill requirements, low to medium. So knowing just how to work an interface and click on some buttons, but we're going to go through that today. And then with COMET-Planner, again, it was created as a simple tool for regional assessments. And so it just takes about 10 seconds really to generate your report, which involves clicking on your location, selecting which class of conservation practice standards you're looking at, and then how many acres you'd like to apply it to. So it doesn't take a lot of information. You just need a general idea of what kind of practices that you're looking for. I do have a question from Ellen that is relative to this slide. Great question about grazing land specific for COMET-Planner versus pasture and rangeland in animal ag and COMET Farm. And so our grazing lands in COMET-Planner are really going to be associated with if you are prescribed grazing, maybe you are planting you're doing rangeland planting, which I don't remember the CPS number, or perhaps you are implementing a silvopasture. And so all of those practices in COMET-Planner are going to be relative to the soil and the impacts of whatever that conservation practice standard is on that soil and soil related emissions. It will not, your COMET-Planner estimate will not include any enteric related emissions or any other emissions related to if you are, perhaps you're housing your animals elsewhere for part of the time. So if they're only on grazing lands for part of the time and you're housing them, you're not going to get your housing related emissions from COMET-Planner. COMET Farm allows you to enter animal specific management, which I would recommend attending one of the trainings that Andy hosts for animal ag, because that will take an entire another hour and a half to describe all of the animal detail nuances. But COMET Farm can account for your enteric emissions and housing related emissions and manure related emissions outside of being deposited on a pasture. Great question. So let's look at who's using the tool. So currently we've got a little over 6,000 registered users for COMET Farm, and we've had over 53,000 sessions for COMET-Planner. COMET Farm, you don't have to currently register. You can use the tool without creating an account. COMET-Planner, there is no account associated with it, so we have no idea how many times or how many specific people are using it. But based off of people who reach out and ask us questions, we know NRCS offices, USDA is using the tool, regional conservation districts, education groups, and businesses are using the tool, as well as just farmers and ranchers. We'll look at a few of those in a slide here in a second. I would like to mention that a lot of these users, sometimes if they're really enthusiastic about the tool, they would really love to share about how they're using the tools, which is featured in our quarterly newsletter, which I believe this top right one is actually from AFT, one of the first ones that I wrote. So let's look at some specific users. So per USDA guidelines, the COMET team does not know who is using the tool outside of if a user is sending in a request and they're asking a question, or if they just wanted to share how they're using the tool. And so here are a glimpse of those who are using the tool based on publicly available information. And they have disclosed that we are able to share that they're using the tool and how they're using the tool. So I'd like to start out with this group in the top left. So Carbon Cycle Institute, who I mentioned before, they really were the pioneers of carbon farming in the world, along with Fibershed, who's also out in California, but they have affiliates all over the world, and Mad Agriculture and Quivera in New Mexico, as well as Wisconsin Land and Water. They're all using the tool as an integral part of the carbon farm planning system, or carbon farm planning curriculum, and building carbon farm plans. And for the most part, they are primarily using COMET-Planner, but will occasionally use COMET Farm. In the bottom left corner, Shelburne Farms and Royal Dairy. Shelburne's up in Vermont and Royal Dairy in Washington have been using the tool. They're just farmers who want to see, they're curious farmers and ambitious, and they want to assess how the management that they're using is impacting their soil and emissions, and are just trying to make really informed decisions. University, Illinois State, and Cornell. They have PhD candidates who are using the tools, mostly COMET Farm, for their thesis research. Washington State Conservation Commission began a program known as Sustainable Farms and Fields that requires applicants to submit project potential estimates based on their conservation practice standards for funding. American Farmland Trust, who we all know and love, they are using COMET Farm as the basis for their retrospective soil health economic calculator tool, which they use to produce their soil case studies. And it is also going to be used, or it's currently used, in their predictive soil health economic calculator as well. And then, so the COMET-Tools also developed through a cooperative agreement between CSU and USDA. So there are several programs which we'll get to in a few, most notably Partnership for Climate Smart for Commodities requires the tools to be used where applicable. And then we also have published the COMET-Planner data set for public consumption. And so various other tools, Washington State Climate Smart Estimator, I believe is the E, Iowa State Carbon Farming Decision Support Tool, as well as Field to Market is using that data as well. There are other various consulting agencies that are not listed here, who we are not at liberty to share. Maybe one day they'll share it, who are also using the tool. All right, let's look at some strengths and limitations for the COMET-Tools. I didn't include all on one page because I didn't want to overwhelm you. So some strengths is that as I mentioned, COMET-Tools were created in parallel with and as a function of the Blue Book methods document. And so it goes through several rounds of peer-reviewed edit as well as public comment, which lasted a little bit longer than we were all anticipating this time around. And so all of the COMET-Tools were created as a function of this Blue Book document. The COMET-Tools are also the official greenhouse gas accounting tool of the USDA. And then we do have coverage in most of the United States, as we mentioned before. And where it is not, there is the COMET-Planner Global tool, which we're updating that, or the COMET team is currently updating that as well. We do have a user-friendly interface. It is, once you get the hang of it, COMET Farm, it makes sense. COMET-Planner is really user-friendly, but coming soon in this summer, we'll be releasing a new user-friendly interface, even more user-friendly. With COMET Farm, you can save your project and return it back to it later. With COMET-Planner, it's quick and easy to use, so it doesn't take that much longer to re-input it. But for both tools, you can download a report, or you can refer back to your report at any time with COMET Farm. With COMET Farm, you really get that flexibility in your scale and adding your exact management within what's offered in COMET Farm. You can create nearly unlimited projects, with each project having up to 50 fields for the cropland section that we're going to look at today. With COMET-Planner, again, it only takes 4 clicks to generate your report. And for both tools, we have a plethora of support, and there is also trainings available, and I'll show you exactly where you can access those. And that is going to get even better with the new interface release, because we'll be releasing a full COMET Farm manual. So you can have all of the information all in one place. With the tool, there is a few limitations. And so one of the limitations is that while COMET-Planner does offer a wide variety of NRCS Conservation Practice Standards, for additional practice standards and implementations to be added into the tool, it does take funding, time, interest, and the science on how that has been implemented in the area. So it is a long reviewal process of adding any practices, and if they are able to be added to the tool. With COMET Farm, there is a hefty list, again, of crops that are available for accounting in the tool, but it does rely on the DACENT model, which we'll talk about in a few slides, for soil carbon and direct N2O emissions. And so for a crop to be included in the tool, it does need to be parameterized in decent, which again takes time, money, and it also takes a lot of the science to go into the tool. Currently, COMET Farm does require a long baseline, which is currently 23 years of baseline data. There are some workarounds that we can talk about in a few slides, but we're going to move that over to strengths in a few months because we're dropping that baseline requirement to 5 years for the new interface. And it seems to be a common theme. It does take a lot of time, effort, and money in order to update the COMET Farm UI or the COMET Planner UI to reflect any practice and methods updates. And so the USDA just released their new updated Blue Book document, and that was maybe about a month ago. And so it will take some time to implement those new methods into the tool. The COMET Planner data set is public or updated. It's been about an annual scale, or every year there's been updates to the COMET Planner data set. And when that is updated, whoever downloads the COMET Planner data set, they'll receive an email saying, hey, there's a new updated data set. Maybe it's time to download again. And these slides will be shared at some point. I think Michelle and Aisha will handle that as well. And then we'll get to where you can access COMET-Tools in a few slides. So I'm sure you all have, I'm sure most of you all are aware that as the official greenhouse accounting tool of USDA, COMET-Tools were deemed the accounting tool for funded projects for Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities, where applicable. So at this time, while the COMET theme we do field questions related to projects and COMET Farm specifically. The COMET-Tools were created under the leadership of NRCS and CSU and USDA. The COMET team does not answer project-specific reporting questions related to those projects. Those should be directed towards the reporting officer. And I'm saying that just as a preface because they have gotten quite a few questions, and we are separate from the partnership team. We are requesting that, let's see, there we go, which I'll show you where we can find this, that all projects who have received an award number to complete this survey that is linked on the homepage for COMET Farm. This is just to help the COMET team triage the partnership project related requests, figure out which tools each project is using and what kind of resources they would need and how the COMET team can best accommodate. Additionally, the COMET team plans to host partnership specific trainings where a USDA rep will be present, and that will be posted on social media and on the homepage as well, but you'll receive an email if you fill out the survey for that specific training. Let's talk about methods. So as mentioned, so the COMET Farm and the COMET suite of tools implements the USDA peer-reviewed methods, and COMET Farm was created in parallel with and as a function of this document. And so the COMET-Tools is going to implement the set of computer models and empirical models to simulate your greenhouse gas emissions within your defined entity. So your field, your heads of cattle, your trees for your forestry. And this will include emissions related to manure and fertilizer, to burning and liming and other management practices. So soil related emissions are going to be estimated using the DACENT model. And in September of 2022, we switched from the 20 centimeter to 30 centimeter DACENT model, as well as using DACENT to assess for direct N2O. This is only going to be used, or DACENT will only be used in your cropland, pasture, range, orchard, vineyard accounting, which we'll be looking at the cropland today. There is also livestock related emissions that you can account for in the COMET tool, specifically in COMET Farm, not in COMET Planner. And while we're not going to be looking at it today, there is a COMET Energy tool that can be used to assess any fuel related emission reductions. So if you wanted to include those in your project estimate, you could do that separately, not in your COMET Farm project. But this would be a good time to mention that the COMET tools are not a life cycle analysis tool. So they are not assessing any upstream, downstream emissions, emissions related to manufacturing, or what happens when your crop leaves your field operation. And we're also not going to be including in your cropland assessment or any of your other animal, ag, forestry, any emissions related to the machinery that is used on that field. That would need to be using the COMET Energy tool or some other tool. I'm sure there's other tools out there. And then, which I'm sure you guys are all aware of as well, the long-awaited new methods update. So I did mention before that USDA periodically releases updated methods for entity scale inventory assessment. This was recently, I believe it was about a month ago, that this was released, and it'll be a few months until COMET Farm is able to catch up. But with the new methods update, we'll see some new management added as well as the new interface. And I believe this answers one of the questions in the chat as well. So with the new interface and new methods released, we're going to see updates to added biochar, flooded rice for specific areas in the US. Big tillage changes, so more options and a lot easier to add in, as well as your flexible baseline and reduced baseline requirements. We're going to see a lot of updates coming to the animal agriculture section, which we're not looking at today, but we'll see majority of the methods have been updated, and there's a new interface to make it a lot easier to input as well. We'll see some new categories, horses, and I believe bunnies make an appearance as well. We're going to see some updated agroforestry methods for biomass carbon estimates as well. And this will be reflected in COMET-Planner as well, coming soon. And then forestry, while the methods are not, I don't believe they're getting updates in the actual methods, you will see an updated interface along with everything else. And then COMET Energy will also see an updated, the underlying eGrid data set will be implemented as well. So let's talk about the DACENT model. Oh no. Okay, well, there was a picture for the DACENT model here, and I'm not entirely sure where it was, but we can talk briefly about the DACENT model, which is going to be the principal soil carbon and direct N2O emission model in the COMET-Tools. And so the DACENT model is going to run simulations about how your crops are grown and about how nitrogen and carbon are going to cycle through the soil and the ecosystem. So it's going to simulate how specific crops are harvested, how the crop residue decomposes, and how carbon is going to fluctuate between those different pools as a result of the physical properties in the soil, like temperature and moisture as well. And so COMET Farm is going to be using the Surgo soil database and the Prism weather database, which I will put on a slide in a second as well. Oh wait, maybe I do have it. Is it here? Oh, there it is. It did make an appearance. Okay. The Surgo soil database and the Prism weather database is going to drive this model. And so the information, also the other information driving this model, is going to come from peer-reviewed data sets from over 200 different sites going back about 100 years. And that data is maintained by universities and private corporations as well. And so with the new updates, which there's also a question about when those are coming, that the new interface should be updated this summer. And so I would keep a lookout on the COMET Farm homepage for any updates on that as well. But we will also be seeing an updated DACENT model with the updated interface. So let's take a bird's eye look at both COMET Farm and COMET-Planner. And so COMET Farm, with the new interface coming soon, it's going to still, both tools will, well, COMET-Planner is not going to change in how it looks, but COMET Farm will still function in a similar manner in terms of, we're looking at a baseline, which is your current, your business as usual scenario. And then with COMET-Planner, you also have a business as usual scenario. However, this is going to be a fixed baseline that you'll select from. And then with COMET Farm, you will implement some sort of change in management, which will be, you can manually change it. You can use one of the quick adds to add a practice change. You can change everything that you added, Or you can just change maybe your tillage level, or maybe you want to add just a cover crop. COMET-Planner, you are implementing some sort of change in management. However, you're selecting from that list of 34 conservation practice standards, and then from there, a type of implementation. And then there we go. With COMET Farm, you'll be able to see, compare the benefits against the baseline. So if you continued with your original management versus if you made your change in management. Whereas COMET-Planner, we're just looking at the benefit of implementing that practice standard. Because COMET-Planner, as a quick decision support tool, we're looking for just a quick and easy way to add in your management changes and get a general idea of the relative benefits of those management changes. And so before we get into COMET-Planner, which is easier to use, we do have to have a solid understanding of COMET Farm. And so we're going to zoom in a little bit further. And this top part is the user interface. And this is what you would see when you go to comet-farm.com, which we'll get to in a second. And so to answer one of the questions on the chat as well, this is only available online and it cannot be downloaded. So you do need to have some sort of internet connection to run both tools. You can download the COMET-Planner dataset, and we'll get to that. So with the COMET Farm interface, you'll just have your specific location, which is your field or a collection of fields, which is going to drive the historic cropping rotations and historic practices that we built up in the back end. And then that is also going to drive your climate data, so from the PRISM database, and the soil data, the Surgo soil database. And it's also based on your specific activities, so what management crop types that you add in there is going to drive which emission factors and USDA methods that are implemented, as well as that DACENT model, to then provide your estimates on a tabular and graphical report, which we will look at. So with COMET Farm currently and up until the new interface release, you do need to be able to enter your exact field boundaries. You can just drop a pin if you don't know where your field ends. You do have to have a general idea of what happened on your land before 2000. And currently, which is our biggest barrier, is the amount of baseline management that is required, which will be reduced in the new interface. However, right now, we do need about 23 years of baseline data. You will need to enter at least a crop type, which includes fallow, and a planting date for those crops. And you will have to enter a scenario management. Now, where you have any of these additional management over on the right, if you have that on your operation, then it is recommended that you would add those in there as well. But these are not required technically to generate a report. Now with the new interface, we will see the biggest reduction in our baseline information. We're dropping from 23 years to a 5-year minimum. You still will need to know your exact field boundaries and your general historic management, as well as your crop and planting date. And then what we're adding over on the recommended is that if you do have biochar application, if that happened, then it would be recommended to add it. And then right before we dive into the tool, we're going to look at the system boundaries. And so we mentioned that that there are several accounting activities: cropland, animals, forestry. While you can include those all in the same project, they are going to be independent and require their own data input. And so the data that you input in there will not be shared between each of the activities. For example, if you have cattle that are being grazed, and you would need to enter your grazing land in the cropland section and your animal information in the animal section. Again, we're just looking at emissions related to your practices on the site, so where you define your fields. We're not looking at your fuel-related emission reductions. We're looking at within the boundaries of that entity, which could be your field, it could be your herds of cattle, it could be your stand of trees. That would be considered your entity. And then last but not least, not a life cycle analysis tool, either one. So with that, I'm going to hop over to the COMET tool. And Michelle, are we looking okay on time? Do I need to speed up at all?
It looks pretty good to me, Aisha.
Great.
Yeah, looks good.
Awesome.
Good.
Okay, so we're going to hop into COMET Farm. And again, if you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. And this is a lot of information all at once. I realize that, but I'm going to show you some tools to help supplement this training as well. So I'm just on the COMET Farm homepage, which is comet-farm.com. And when you get here, you are greeted by a welcome window of the most recent updates, which there aren't any big updates. So if you've been on here before recently, it looks the same. Here's that survey that I mentioned. If you are affiliated with Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities Project. If not, you don't have to fill that out. But this will be where we'll also make any announcements of that upcoming interface change. So keep a lookout. On the homepage, there are a few pieces to point out here. We've got that COMET quarterly newsletter that I mentioned earlier, where we feature new updates coming, maybe a word from users if they want to share, and maybe where COMET Farm is being used in the news. We also have a slew of COMET trainings that are available. So there is one tomorrow morning, and that is on the Cropland section, which is what we'll be looking at today. But there's also, it's a 3-series training. The next week will be animal ag, and the following one will be if you are looking to create a multiple accounting project. And then once you have attended a training and you still have questions, or maybe you're knee deep in your project and something came up, and it's easier to share a screen than to write an email, we do offer an office hours on Mondays, where users, preferably if you have attended a training, because we wouldn't have time to go over just an exact training. So this is an open hour for you to ask questions about your project or just general COMET questions. But remember, we would prefer if you attended a training first. And then while we're on this page, if you notice, this little need help widget is going to follow you on every page that you're on. And this was my pride and joy when I first started. And it's populated with probably well over 100 questions that are commonly asked about the tools. You can type in, maybe you're looking for different crops. And so I've populated this with a ton of questions. But perhaps you still can't find your answer here. You can also contact us directly through this as well. And remember, we're not mind readers. So if you're having an issue and you need some help and maybe a screenshot would help, please send that. And specific is terrific in your questions, because we get a lot of questions. And so if you can ask very specific questions, that will help us get back to you in a timely manner. We're gonna start by going to COMET Farm, but you can also access COMET Energy and COMET-Planner, which we'll go to later through here. So we're gonna get started, and I'm gonna say start using COMET Farm, the big orange button. Remember, the new interface will be coming soon in the summer, and it will look a lot different. It's a lot sleeker. However, the overall functionality will stay in a similar manner, but we will be releasing a COMET manual that should get everyone started with the new interface. So if you're new to COMET Farm, if you've never been here, well, I guess I was still signed in, you will need, you don't have to create an account, but we would recommend, because once you do create an account, you can refer back to all of your projects. And I have a lot of projects in here. Remember, projects is just a collection of different accounting activities. And within COMET Farm, we have an option of creating demo projects, which allow you to kind of just poke around in it within a completed project to get the general idea of how to use the tool. We're going to not do that today, but you can poke around on your own. I'm going to create a project from scratch so I can show you how quick and easy that is. So I'm going to hit create new project, and I'm going to say AFT sample project number 2, because I've already done this once. So I'm going to say create, and this is going to appear at the very bottom. You can rename it, you can delete it. We're going to keep it. And then when you refer back to it, it'll be in alphabetical order. I'm going to select my accounting activity. You can select as many or as few as you want. And because I have special privileges on my account, I do see some dev things. Unfortunately, at this time, you guys don't get to see dev things, but apparently you get a sneak peek today. So we're going to do just cropland accounting for this demo. I'm going to define my activities. And now we're going to identify where our field boundaries are. I'm going to go to where I'm located, which is in Fort Collins. I would like to preface that I have no idea what the management was on this land. One, I've only been in Colorado for 4 years, but two, I was probably not alive at this point when this was farmed where we're going at some point. So we're going to start with a random parcel of land. If this was your project, we would recommend starting with the field that you're working on. And we're going to define our field boundaries so we can tie all of our management to a specific area. We can do that one of 4 ways. You can do it by add a parcel by point and drop a point right in the center of your field and then add the acres. I'm going to define this by a polygon because I want to draw this exact shape-ish, this polygon. I'm going to call this field 1. I'm going to hit save. And so that will automatically save your field. You can also add your parcel by a circle, which doesn't make sense for this field, but if you had a circular field, this would allow you to add a quick perfect circle. You can modify your parcel by, you can change the shape of it, you can drag it around, you can delete your parcel. If you delete your parcel, I would highly recommend that's exactly what you want to do. There is no going back. That is there's no point of return there. And then the final way that you can add a parcel or multiple fields is another name for the parcel is by uploading an Esri shapefile. If you are going that route, I would highly recommend you check out my article for uploading shapefiles because it is not the most intuitive, and that is one of the changes that is coming for the new interface. Additionally, some neat features on this page is we do have a soils layer. So I mentioned that we've got the Surgo soil database that is used in COMET Farm and COMET-Planner. And so you're able to see the different map units that are within your field. You're also able to click around to get more information about each of your map units. So you can get your texture, your bulk density, and if it's hydric or not. You can also download that soil information. This would be a good time to mention that you are not able to, at this time, nor with the update coming in the summer, you're not able to update your own soil data. You have to use the data that COMET Farm is implementing, which is the Surgo soil database. So you can add up to 50 fields per project. Each field has a maximum of 1,100 acres. I would not recommend currently or in the future adding 50 1,100 acre fields. It will slow down the system because with that many fields you will be adding, that's a lot of map units, and each of the methods, all of the equations that are run for your project are run on a map unit basis or on a map unit level, and then you're given a weighted average for the estimate at the end. And so we would recommend sticking around the 20 field average per project. You can have as many projects as you'd like. And so I would recommend keeping it, don't hit the 50. It'll slow your system down. And so so we're done defining our fields. So we're going to hop to our historic management. And I will get to the question in the chat about the baseline. So for historic management, remember we need to fill out some information for before 2000. Currently with the new interface, it'll be before the baseline period. Again, I don't know what this management was, so I'm going to take an educated guess and say this was irrigated. I'm also going to take a wild guess and say it was not enrolled in a CRP. And this was likely irrigated annual crops in rotation and intensive tillage. If you this is where I would recommend, if you know your information, I would plug that in. I do not know how this particular field was managed, so I'm using an educated guess. If you had more than one field, you would have to fill out all of this information per field before moving on. Luckily, if all of your fields are within the same area, there's a good chance it was managed similarly. So you could copy management from one field to another.
Hey, Haley, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. We are actually off time by just a little bit. So we have about 10 minutes left of the demo, and then we'll skip the first Q&A and go straight into COMET-Planner, if that's all right with you. Okay.
Awesome, that works. Thanks. The purpose of the CRP question is to, all of the historic management is to generate your historic baseline soil carbon estimates. And so if something was enrolled in CRP at the time, then you're likely going to have a higher soil carbon organic stocks in the historic period than if it was not enrolled in CRP. So we're going to hit next, and we're going to go to the baseline management, which again, with the new interface, this is going to look a little different, but the total functionality is going to be similar. And you are able to add in management one of two ways. The first is going to be adding in manually. At this time, I will point out that this is your baseline management. And so our baseline management is going to be 23 years, which is a lot of information that we have to add in order to move on to the next period, the scenario period. You cannot go on with anything undefined. And so we can add our crop in one of two ways. We can select a crop from this list here, which I'm just going to add my planting date. Again, I do not know how this was managed, so I'm taking an educated guess. And then we're going to add our harvest information, which I'm going to assume this was harvested maybe early October. I'm going to assume 130 bushels. And then I'm also going to assume that we did not remove anything off the field outside of the corn that we were harvesting. You have the ability to add in a grazing if you would like. We're not for this scenario. And then I'm going to hop to our tillage implements, which is our next page. And we're going to assume that this field was intensively tilled the day before it was planted. It defaults to intensive tillage, but you may select from any of these options. The new interface will offer, the new methods there are new methods for estimating tillage intensity. And so the new interface will reflect that as well, which I'm very proud of the calculator that I designed for that, which will give you more options and easier addition of adding your implements into the tool. You can add more if you'd like to. We're just going to keep it as one. If you'd also like to know about how COMET Farm implements what each of these tillage classes mean, you can click on the little question mark. I'm going to skip ahead and hit next and go to irrigation. You can add irrigation events if you'd like. I'm going to not for this scenario, but you can also add in like a series of irrigation events. So if you irrigated once a week for the entire growing season, you can add that here. You could add in manure and compost additions. You can change your compost or your manure options here. We do provide defaults of the moisture total N and C to N ratio based off of USDA suggestions. And then you could just modify any of these, anything that COMET Farms defaults, you can modify. But if you notice, as I change these numbers, our total N applied will also change. I'm going to not add any manure for this one. I'm going to hop to fertilizer, which you could add multiple fertilizer events if you'd like. For this one, I'm just going to leave it at ammonium nitrate. And then I'm going to say maybe we added 160 pounds of nitrogen per acre for this field. You can change the date, which I'm going to change that in a few slides, and I'll show you how to do that in a different way. And then you can add liming events, you can add burning events, and then you're at the end of management additions for your first field of your first year. Now, when you hit the next button at the end here, you're given the option to add an additional crop for up to 3 crops per calendar year. They cannot have overlapping dates, and that is the same for now. And with the new interface, that is a limitation of decent. I'm going to not add an additional crop, so I'm going to say no thanks. If your crops were managed similarly year to year or across fields, you could copy your crop from one field to another, or just 1 year if you wanted to, or just 1 year in another field. I'm going to not, because I'm going to show you another shortcut. So now we're still on this year and this crop because it's bolded. The second way that you can add in crops and management is using the drag and drop, which is a feature that is designed to help you if you have just crops that are managed in a pretty typical manner for the area, like corn, and maybe we have a corn and soybean system here in Colorado. You could drag your crop over and drop it off. Then you're going to select if it's irrigated or not. There's a very good chance if it was in Colorado, it's irrigated. We're going to say that it was intensively tilled for the corn and reduced till for the soybean. And with this scenario, when we hit create rotation, it's going to populate every other year with this rotation and with generic irrigation and add in the tillage that we implemented here. So when I say create, that is going to apply to the entire baseline. It's also going to populate typical planting and harvest dates, typical yields and residue removal amounts. It'll take the tillage that we indicated. It'll take a generic irrigation if we indicated that there is irrigation there. And then it'll add in typical fertilizer application rates based on those USDA defaults. But anything that COMET Farm defaults, remember you are able to, I forget what that was. Whoops, 509, there we go. You are able to modify any of the defaults that COMET Farm makes. And you'll see that the soybean is also populated in a similar fashion. Now our entire baseline is populated. You could go through and check each one if you wanted. I don't have time for that at the moment. And I don't want to click through every page of management. So I'm just going to say skip ahead. You can add that extra crop for the year that you're on if you want. I'm going to say no thanks. And now our copy field, because we're working on this field or this year, our check mark is there. I could copy it to other years if I wanted. If I copy anything to a year that is outlined in red, it will overwrite everything that you had in there. And again, there is no undo, unfortunately. And that will stay the same with the new interface. And at that point, we have completed all of our management for our baseline year here. And if we had more than one field, we'd have to do that for all fields, but we're going to go to our future management and we're going to take a shortcut. Our future management is going to be entered the exact same way as our baseline management, with the exception of our change in years. We're now looking at 10 years after the end of the baseline. I'm going to take a shortcut and I'm going to copy all of my management from the baseline, because the only thing I want to change is my tillage. And I'm going to add a conservation practice so I can quickly change whatever management that I added. Remember, you can change anything in the scenario period that you want. However, we're just going to make one small change of converting anytime there was a tillage. We want it to go from the original tillage to no tillage. You do have other options of you could add cover crops, reduce your fertilizer, you could convert the whole thing to a border, but we're just going to stick with that tillage reduction. And I'm going to keep editing so I can show you a few things. You can add up to 10 scenarios to compare to your baseline. We're going to keep it as 1. And now I just want to double check that my tillage was changed. And now our corn was intensive till, now it is no till. And I'm going to trust that the system did everything else, because it always does, made all the other changes. And I'm going to say skip ahead because I want to hop straight to my report. And I don't want to add an extra crop, so I'm going to say no thanks. I don't need to copy anything either, so I'm going to say no thanks to that as well. And then I'm going to say go to the report, and we're going to hop back to our slide deck because this is going to take a few minutes to generate your report. My guess is this would be about 2 minutes. The more fields, the more scenarios that you have, the more map units, the longer it will take to generate your report. But if you don't generate a report in 15 minutes, and that would be for a lot of fields, please send a request because there might be something getting stuck in the system if it's taking more than that. So I'm going to hop back here. I'm also going to answer the question about histosols. Unfortunately, I believe histosols are not able to be assessed, but we can double check that for you. I will confirm. Okay, so to generate a report, we're waiting on that to generate, but we'll just stick with our COMET Farm report here. You'll get a tabular report. And within your tabular report, we'll break down your source categories and your subsource categories. You can expand each of those. Then we've got our baseline emissions. So this would be the average annual tons of CO2e per field over the 10 years, assuming that the management that you entered in the baseline is continued. And so our time scale here is on the time of the scenario, which is 10 years after the end of the baseline. And I realize that this is a lot of information. We do have a helpful resource down below where you can interpret it helps you interpret your cropland report. Then we have our emissions associated with our scenario. Again, the average annual tons of CO2e per field over the 10 years of the scenario period. And then we have our change in our scenario period compared to our baseline period. We do include an uncertainty assessment currently for categories except for direct N2O and soil carbon, but that should be available with the new interface this coming summer. And again, this is assessed using the Monte Carlo method. Whenever you click on each of the little histograms, you'll get this pop-up window for each of those. Again, just some background as well. A positive value in COMET Farm, so the 7.3 is going to indicate 7.3 metric tons of CO2e emissions, whereas a negative value is going to indicate reduced emissions or carbon sequestered. And so we could interpret this value by switching from our baseline emissions or baseline management of conventional tillage and reduced for soybeans to no-till, that we saw there's an estimated reduction of 7.6 tons of CO2e annually for this field. You do have the ability, if you had more than one field, which we didn't in our scenario, they would appear down below, and then we would total up all of your fields within your project here. If you had more than one scenario, which we only had one, they would appear to the right. And again, we still have that change column compared to your baseline. And so for this extra scenario, I also ran a reduced till emissions as well. We do have a graphical report, which is just going to show, whoops, wrong way. It's going to show the first column, the emissions column for each of those scenarios. And this is on a field basis. And then there is also a water holding capacity report. This is going to be provided at a field level as well as the soil map unit level. And this currently cannot be downloaded, but with the new interface, this should be able to be downloaded coming soon. Can the report show changes in emissions, such as change in soil carbon, change in N2O emissions? Yes, the report can show that. So we've got carbon up in the top level, and then we've got our N2O, which I believe on the previous slide, we've got a breakdown of our direct N2O emissions and our indirect N2O emissions as well. And then finally, there is a detailed report that is available, which would give you all of the inputs, most of the inputs that you added in for your management, as well as your emissions and your source and subsource categories based on an annual output. We do not have time to dive into this, so if you are interested in reviewing this detailed report, I would highly recommend that you attend the one of Andy's trainings, like the one tomorrow morning, or office hours coming soon. And then I think we are running low. I hope that you guys are putting questions in the chat, in the Q&A, because I think I'm answering them as we go along. So we're running low on time, so I'm going to dive right into COMET-Planner, which should be a little quicker. Quick reminder, COMET-Planner, again, created for a quick scenario comparison to demonstrate the relative benefits of implementing those NRCS Conservation Practice Standards. So similar structure in COMET Farm in terms of baseline compared to a scenario, however, a lot easier. So let's see. So the COMET-Planner dataset was created by taking random cropland and grassland data points from each of the 283 major land resource areas around the United States. And then for each of those random points, using the NAS cropland data layer, cropping rotations for back to 2008 were constructed for each of those points. And then we pulled in cropping or crop management data from USDA in terms of typical fertilizer application rates and dates. All of this data was used to create the fixed baselines for each of those points. And then that was run through the COMET Farm API, which is kind of like a backside door entrance to access all of the methods and models, still using the same climate and soil data, and similar management that we added in there as the fixed baseline in order to generate a huge data set, which allows users to just select your state, in this case, California, county, perhaps Sonoma County, and then which practice you'd like to add, so cover crops, along with an implementation, in order to generate a quick scenario comparison based on how many acres that you would like to apply that to. And okay, so then now we can hop directly into the tool. Actually, for time, I'm just going to keep it on here. So with COMET-Planner, you'll just be at comet-planner.com, which you can also access through COMET Farm on the homepage. You'll name your project and select your state and county. You'll also select your class of conservation practice. So for our scenario here, we're looking at cropland management. For this case, we are looking at residue and tillage management, which is no-till, and we have to select our implementation from our practice standard here. And then we're also indicating what our baseline was. So here, our baseline was intensive till, and it was also, well, on this one, I selected non-irrigated. So on this one, we're looking at non-irrigated cropland. And our practice that we're implementing is our strip or no-till. Then step 4, we're just adding in our how many acres that we would like to apply this practice to. And as soon as you enter your acres, on the fly, we'll generate your greenhouse gas emission reductions and your approximate soil carbon sequestration values. One key big difference is that COMET-Planner is giving you reductions. And I wonder if I did not put our reductions here. And so this is still our average annual CO2e per year in reductions, but the signs are the opposite of COMET Farm, which is explained in one of the articles in the Need Help widget. And so we would interpret this value as by switching from intensive to no-till on non-irrigated cropland in Larimer County, Colorado, for 100 acres, that would result in 16 metric tons of CO2e reductions per year. You also have the ability to download your COMET-Planner results, currently just as a PDF. But we've heard the request, and hopefully coming soon, you will be able to download this as a CSV. But currently it's just a PDF, which would give you all of the practices that you added in. So you could add as many of those practices that you wanted previously. I just added one. Which I would actually recommend you download your report. That way you know when you ran it, because there was a question about how often COMET-Planner dataset is updated, and that is about annually. Sometimes it's every 9 months, but on average annually. And so when the data set is updated based off of new methodology, you might see a slight difference in your report. So knowing when you ran your report could help when you share wherever you're using this data. There is also detailed emission reductions. So when you scroll all the way down, you're able to see that emission reduction coefficient, which is what would be provided in the COMET-Planner dataset, downloadable dataset. Someone might want to use this if you are looking to assess a pretty small acreage. And so if I wanted to plug into here, maybe only 2 acres, you might just get a value here of, actually, you will get a value here of 0 and 0. It's not to say that there's still not a emission reduction benefit from implementing on 2 acres. It's just a very small value. So you could use that emission reduction coefficient to multiply against your acres to find that small estimated reduction. Oops, too fast. Okay. And then before I open the floor for questions, the last thing I would like to mention is all of the support tools that are available for COMET Farm. So we do like to we're always referring back to the Blue Book. I have the older Blue Book bigger here because that is still the current Blue Book that implements the current methods in COMET Farm. However, the new method or the new interface coming this summer will be implementing the new methods for entity scale inventory, still referred to as the Blue Book. There is also the COMET-Planner report, which I'm going to go back a few slides to show you where you can access that. The COMET-Planner report would be underneath the COMET-Planner info button. And I would recommend checking that out as well, because it will give you more details on how COMET-Planner implements the USDA methods and how COMET-Planner dataset was run through the COMET Farm API as well. And then we do also have the COMET-Planner dataset that is available for download, which you could do that here and just fill out a quick survey and we'll automatically download the dataset for you. Which, remember, that dataset is what's being used in Field to Market. I believe Iowa State is also using that and a few other tools. Let's see what else is available. I mentioned the trainings that are available, trainings and office hours that you can register for ahead of time, and you'll get the recording for that as well, and a bunch of resources that Andy and I have created. We also have the COMET-Tools YouTube suite, which has a ton of helpful resources, and we'll be seeing an overhaul when the new interface is released as well. And then we've got the tools and support within the Need Help widget that follow you on every page, including COMET-Planner. And then the biggest thing that's not on here, because it's not currently available, is with the new interface, we'll be releasing a full COMET Farm manual, which is pretty much A to Z, everything you would need to know about COMET Farm and what we went through today, as well as detailed step-by-step guidance instructions on how to create the different types of projects. A guidance tree on which tool that you should use based off of what you're looking to find, as well as some methodology support as well with frequently asked questions that we get. So that will be coming soon. Okay, so that was a lot of, so I think we've got some time for questions and questions.
That was excellent, Haley, and I'm so glad you were so comfortable answering questions on the fly. So I think we've got 2 more at least, and everyone, this is your last chance. Get your questions in. 3, very good. Go ahead,
Awesome.
Haley.
Thank you. All right, so we've got an anonymous question. Have you been able to estimate how much accuracy degrades from the change 23 to 5-year baseline period? And so I personally have not done that yet. I do believe the team is working on that. And based off of the history, the more information that you can provide, the better in terms of certainty of your results that you're going to have in COMET Farm. And one of the reasons why we are dropping that result or dropping the baseline time period is because we have so many users who just have no idea based off of lack of records, or maybe they didn't even own the property at that time. And so they were guessing anyways. And so I believe they will be working on releasing an estimate of what if you know your baseline for 23 years versus if you only enter 5 years. But they will be keeping that 23-year baseline option available for anyone to add in. I'm not sure how many folks are going to opt to do that. But if you know the 23 years, we would always recommend you add all of that in there. But it is going to take some time to do that. The CRP question, I believe we did answer that. That one, you might want to add in the CRP. Well, if something was enrolled in CRP before 2000, all of the historic management data is going to be used to generate your spin-up files, which are going to help assess or estimate your beginning soil carbon stocks before you add in all your baseline management. And so if you're adding in CRP, or if your land was enrolled in CRP, then there's a very good chance you're going to have a higher historic carbon stocks than if your land was not. And so if it was, we would recommend putting that in there. Will more conservation practices be added to the COMET-Planner tool with the update? That is a great question. From my knowledge, no additional like NRCS Conservation Practice Standard as a whole will be added. I believe there is in the works of adding additional implementations. So that implementation, let's scroll back up to, so your implementation list would be over on this side. And so for example, I don't have it on here, but in grazing lands, there's an option for silvopasture. And silvopasture is limited regionally based off of just data that was available, of data on how that is currently being implemented, and if it actually is being implemented. But, whoops, too far. There are plans to add additional implementations for existing NRCS conservation practice standards where they were previously not available. If you do not see an NRCS conservation practice standard that you would like to be included in COMET-Planner, or an implementation that you're not seeing in COMET-Planner, I would highly recommend that you send a little message to Andy in the Need Help widget. And while we can't guarantee that a practice or an implementation will be added to the tool, we do keep a laundry list that I call the COMET Farm wish list item that is presented to NRCS whenever we're on a call with them to see if maybe they have data available, or maybe they've heard of interest elsewhere, so we can get the ball rolling and potentially add that to the tool. So if you don't see it, please add it to the Need Help widget. Great question about API updates will be included in the summer 2024 update. For those who are not familiar with the API, I mentioned it briefly as kind of a side door entrance to COMET Farm that allows you to bypass the interface, but you do have to have experience building an XML file and then interpreting an XML file. And so we did not mention that much in this training. And there will be basic updates that will be accompanying the UI changes with the API. So wherever there was a new management that was added, those updates will be coming in parallel with the UI updates. But a overhaul of the API that will not be seen until after the UI update. Okay, so then we've got the last question on here. Sometimes see a mismatch between NRCS practice standards and COMET scenarios, or find that some scenarios are not available in some counties where there might in fact be applicable and desirable. Suzanne, that is a great question, and we get that a lot. This goes back to that silvopasture request. I had so many folks in North Carolina looking for assessing silvopasture. And unfortunately, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg scenario where there has to be data on implementation in order for that practice to be added to the tool. There also has to be a soil carbon benefit that can be assessed where there are methods available to assess it. And I understand the limitation of back to the chicken or the egg, that sometimes you want to see what that estimate is before you go and apply that practice. And so that is where I would highly recommend you send a request to the team through the need help widget, or oops, wrong way, or through the team email of which practice and where you're located and what's not available. So we could present that to NRCS.
Terrific. You did it, Haley.
I did it. One more last thing is that we do have a plethora of other resources as well. But the team's email, if you don't want to use the need help widget, is this app NREL. And so I would write that down because Andy will be fielding those questions as well.
Excellent. Hope everyone's taken a screenshot, have already written it down. I am going to share my screen now. It's our one final slide. You all know it and love it. Haley, this was just fabulous, and I really commend you for handling these really terrific, high-quality questions so well and so on the fly. So thank you. Thanks for being with us, Haley.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I look forward to hearing about all of your projects from Andy in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So thanks everyone for participating in today's webinar. Here are some next steps in our collective outcomes quantification journey. First, we're looking forward to you joining us at some or all of our next set of tools training webinars that will be held the first Wednesday of every month, except July, which once again has been moved to the second Wednesday. If you can't make it to one or more of the webinars but want to view the session, the recording should be available by the following Monday. Second, at the end of the webinar, please share your feedback with us by answering a quick 9-question survey. I shared the link at the beginning of the session, and it will also appear as a new tab in your internet browser when the webinar ends. Please take a couple of minutes to share your feedback so we can keep improving these events. And don't forget that you will be entered into a drawing for a gift card just for filling out the survey. So we thank you in advance for your participation and good luck. Michelle and I are offering free coaching sessions to 6 farm project managers who secure a session with us. These sessions are individually tailored to you in order to help you figure out which tools or methods are right for your project. So if you're interested, just email me, Aisha Tapp Ross, and in the subject line, write coaching request. And finally, if you'd like to order a free print copy or download a PDF of the Outcomes Estimation Tools Guide, which this webinar series is based on and pictured to your right, you can visit the report's website, which you can easily find using the keywords AFT Outcomes Tools, or click the link in the chat that I am about to share. So thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you on June 5th. And yes, we will actually be sharing these PDFs by Monday, Haley slides by Monday on our website as well. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody.